the Ohio EPA representative, not Ms. Vogel, but the other guy that is in town. When asked why they didn't dam up the creek and dig up the creek bed as quickly as possible once they knew the chemicals had gone downstream, he said it would be too devastating for the ecosystem. And he says that they're now 4 weeks out seeing evidence of life coming back up the river, where they're observing some minnows. They're not up to the 2 mile mark where I play around in the creek yet. There's not a minnow or any other wildlife besides an earthworm and a water strider here and there to be seen. But he contradicts himself. If he said it's a great sign that minnows are starting to come back upstream, that's after a devastating fish kill from deadly chemicals that at first it was reported killed 3,500 fish, but was later revised to 43,000 fish. That's 43,000. Everything that walked, crawled, swam, even bacteria was killed in that creek, Leslie Run, all from deadly chemicals. And to this day, 5 weeks later, I can pick up rocks and chemicals still spew out. It's just irresponsible not to dam that, reroute it, or dig up the creek bed as soon as that tragedy happened. Norfolk Southern said, well, we cannot address the creeks until we're done with the crash site. At first, they were telling the owners of the gas station right there that's been shut down ever since, right at the crash site, that it would be 90 days. And then now they say, well, it could be up to a year before they're done with the crash site. So I've never seen anybody in that stretch of creek. Now, somebody had to be there to put the barriers down where you see my videos in the creek. Somebody had to be there to place the scrubbing pads and the barriers, which are now removed, which I mentioned in the video, allow the stream to flow really fast to do their work for them. The solution to pollution is dilution. Basically, the solution to pollution is sending it off to everybody else and dispersing it, and give the gift that keeps on giving. But here's the contradiction in the EPA's theory of digging up the creeks would have just been too devastating for the ecosystem and harmed the wildlife in the creek. The wildlife in the creek are dead. There's still nothing there. And we're 5 weeks out from the derailment. You clean up a 2 to 3 mile stretch of creek, and you would have got those chemicals out of that creek bed. What else are you going to kill? It's already dead. And let's say the minnows come back. Let's say you kill 10 minnows. Let's say you kill 10,000 minnows. If those minnows and that wildlife is already starting to reappear by your observations, if they're starting to reappear after their entire population in that stretch of creek was killed off by deadly chemicals, and they're starting to appear with chemicals still left in the creek, if they can come back from that, even if the entire population came back and there were still chemicals in that creek, all the frogs, all the minnows, all the life, all the bacteria, even if it all came back and there were still chemicals in the bed of that creek, and you dug it up and killed everything again that swims, walks, or crawls in that creek, if they can come back from the chemicals, they'll come back from your bulldozers. The excuse of not digging up the creek because it'll be too harmful for the ecosystem is so outrageous that I'm having a hard time finding the words to understand how you could even say something like that and think that we would believe it. There's a lot of talk about the hellbenders, that they're trying to make a comeback in this area. I submit that you do more harm by not digging up the creeks. You had dispersed chemicals, and I get it. In the beginning, what could you do? I mean, it was flowing. You're fighting the fire, and that's the main concern. But to your own admission, you were there 2 hours after the derailment, and you were putting up barriers. You began forming a plan. Well, you should have planned on the creek down lower as well. You know, you guys are trained in this. That is what you do. If in your tool bag, all you have is to take care of the main site and forget about the rest and let chemicals flow down the creek into our creek beds, into our soil, and into other counties and other states below us, then you need more tools in your tool bag. But I believe there's more to it than that. I don't understand whether it's laziness on our government's part. And we know Norfolk Southern doesn't give a crap. I mean, we know that. But the EPA, I think, is supposed to be looking out for the citizens that put it in power. The EPA is supposed to work for us. And J.D. Vance, at the Senate testimony, was worried about the big pile of toxic dirt that is dug up and just sitting there at the crash site. And he said, what if it rains and it sends that toxic material back into the ground? Well, first of all, they let that toxic material sit in the ground for 4 weeks before doing anything about it. And it's rained a lot since then. So a lot of that stuff already soaked into the ground. But you're worried about rain coming down on the ground and forcing the chemicals further into the ground. And we're not supposed to be worried about our creek beds, where 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, there is a continuous layer of water pushing those chemicals into the soil. These chemicals, which are lipid soluble, they do not dissolve in water. That is why they're sitting at the bottom of the creek, not dissolving. And they're being pushed into the soil. If you're worried about a little bit of raindrops, which I am worried about, we should also be worried about the chemicals that are laying under the rocks that have been laying on the creek beds, with water just forcing them down into the soil. And a lot of you watching these videos don't understand or don't know that a lot of us are on wells. I was talking to a person when this all happened. I don't know, she's from some city, and I was calling about something unrelated. She said, "Oh, you're from East Palestine. I feel so bad." And I talked about wells. And she had no idea. She was from the city. She didn't understand the concept of a well. She thought, when I said wells, she's thinking of like we go grab a bucket and we move the handle, we turn the handle, and we get our water out of a bucket. It's so funny. For those of you that don't know, having a well is no different than, you wouldn't notice it any different than having city water. It's pretty much just a hole in the ground with casing and steel. You have a pump actually at the bottom of the well, which pumps it up into a holding tank, into your utility room, where you would have, let's say, your furnace, and it holds it in that tank, and that's your water supply. So when you turn on the sink, you know, everything works just as if you had city water. So we're not going out into like a wishing well type thing. But we are on wells, which are very susceptible to contamination. On the EPA government website, it says don't dare spill so much as a half a gallon of gas near your well in your home, in your yard, because that can contaminate your entire well. And we're supposed to be placated by being told that these potentially tens of thousands of gallons of deadly chemicals that float into our drains, our storm drains, down our street, into our waterways, into our land, are not going to affect our well. All right, headed to work. More later.